Welcome back. Now, some of you may remember a while ago I did a video on underrated guitarists. I featured 5 players in that one. Just a quick recap on who I covered there. Number 1, Mike Campbell, of course, best known for his work in Tom Petty's band. Number 2, Elliot Easton from the Cars, some of the most concise and perfectly constructed solos ever. Number 3 was Terry Kath, whose life was tragically cut short. Great player who Hendrix said was the best ever. Number 4, Johnny Marr from the Smiths. Amazingly tasteful, incredible rhythm player and composer. And finally, I went with Paul McCartney, which seems to be a little bit of a head scratcher at first until you realize that most of the praise we hear for Paul is as a composer or a singer or a bass player, but not so much a guitar player, and he's really good. So today I'm going to cover 3 more underrated guitar players, all 3 with very different styles, and I think at least 2 of them came up in the comments of my last underrated guitarists video as players that you guys would like to see if I did a sequel. And finally, the usual reminders: like, subscribe, share the video, ring the bell, and if you'd like to make a financial contribution, buy me a coffee or PayPal. Look for the links in the description. Let's get going. I figured I'd start by showing a bit of Robbie Krieger's incredible range. That's the intro to Spanish Caravan from the Doors' Waiting for the Sun album, and some pretty impressive flamenco guitar. That's a style that Krieger had started working on back when he was a child, and it's quite well done. Now, to be fair, he was not completely original on that. It borrows heavily from a well-known flamenco piece called Asturias by 19th century Spanish composer Isaac Albeniz, but it's still very cool. And whenever I hear that, it kind of makes me wish he had done more of that style. Krieger is one of those guitar players who clearly realizes that what you leave out is often just as important as what you actually play. Obviously, a lot of the rhythm in the Doors tunes is carried by keyboardist Ray Manzarek. And Krieger is the type that's not a real strummer. He rarely plays rhythm guitar in the traditional sense. He's often just filling little gaps, doing little embellishments in between the verses, for example. A perfect illustration of this is People Are Strange, one of the Doors' best-known tracks. Listen to this brief snippet here. The sharp staccato, upstroked chords, and the one-note fill that he plays not once but twice. I don't think there are a whole lot of lead guitar players with the restraint to play a one-note fill.
When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange.
The Doors drew heavily from many different styles throughout their career, but one mainstay that kept returning was the blues, and Krieger did some great things in that genre. Stuff like Love Me 2 Times, which was an original, and Crawling King Snake, which was a cover of an old traditional blues song, which has been recorded by many artists, most notably John Lee Hooker. But being a band that burst onto the scene in the year 1967, the Doors certainly had their dalliances with psychedelia as well. Take The End, the long, epic track which closes their debut album. It's got a great, almost Indian raga type feel. Krieger tunes his guitar to drop D, which accentuates the drone. And the song features what we call modal interchange. In that long intro, it doesn't seem to know exactly which mode it's following. D is definitely the tonal center, and the major seventh is featured prominently. But then minor third as well. So that seems to imply maybe a melodic minor or harmonic minor. But then in the next moment, we get a major third popped in there. So it's kind of weaving in and out of various things. But by the verse, the vocal melody seems to have settled in D Dorian mode, which is characterized by flatted third, major six, flat seven. This is the end, beautiful friend. That little piece starts on the fifth. C is the flatted seventh. B is the major sixth. And then back to A. That intro is one of those bits that I've never really felt compelled to learn note for note. There are a few characteristic riffs that you want to get in there. But other than that, it's great to just get into the general groove of it all and improvise, kind of make it your own. I suspect Krieger played it different every time as well. German guitarist Uli Roth is undoubtedly the least known of the three players I'm covering today. In fact, I suspect any of you who are not pretty deep into the hard rock, heavy metal genre have probably never heard of him, which is a shame because the guy is a complete monster on guitar, remains so to this day. In recent years, he's designed his own guitar called the Sky Guitar, and in 2006, he founded something called the Sky Institute in Southern California, which is comprised of lectures, master classes, and concerts. Interestingly, one of those concerts, which was conceived to invoke the spirit of musical freedom, featured none other than the guy we just talked about, Robbie Ker, a completely different style of guitar playing from Uli John Roth's, but obviously a guy that Roth must have respected. Roth is still best known for his work in the Scorpions, even though his tenure in that band was pretty brief, from about 1974 to 77. You get the feeling he felt a bit constrained by the hard rock format. The path he's taken ever since leaving has been a lot more esoteric, and you get the feeling that rock stardom was not something he really cared a whole lot about. He joined the Scorpions when the original Scorpions guitarist Michael Schenker left to join UFO in 1973. For those of you who only know the Scorpions through hard rock sing-alongs such as Rock You Like a Hurricane or power ballads like Still Lovin' You, the Scorpions of the early to mid-70s was a whole other animal, much more sort of progressive, 70s for lack of a better term, and honestly just much less commercial. Roth is widely credited as being one of the originators of what's known as the neoclassical movement in rock guitar. I think we'd have to credit Ritchie Blackmore with starting that movement, but Roth picked up the torch in a big way, and it was later continued by people like Randy Rhoads and Yngwie Malmsteen. This style is typified by the use of more exotic scales, definitely going beyond the usual bluesy pentatonic scales that most rock guitarists favor. These guys generally have excellent technique, speed, accuracy, and a composition style that literally takes from, say, a Baroque composer like Bach or a classical composer like Mozart. But the great thing about Roth, he had other influences as well. He was kind of a Hendrix nut back in his youth. You can see it even in the way he dressed most of the time. And this gives his playing a funkiness that you won't hear in a guy like, say, Yngwie Malmsteen. Listen to this extended intro here. This is from the Scorpions' great live album, Tokyo Tapes, a tune called Polar Nights, and you can definitely hear a little bit of Hendrix in this. Hear those choke strums? That little trill screams Hendrix. And that chord. That's what we sometimes call the Jimi Hendrix chord. It's a 7-sharp 9 chord. Really funky, huh? Some little bluesy licks there. Gotta admit though, this guy's technique, way beyond Hendrix. Not saying he was better than Hendrix, but the guy could really play. See that little chromatic run there? I don't think Hendrix would have done. But perhaps Roth's signature performance with the Scorpions is a thing called The Sails of Charon from the Taken by Force album. It perfectly illustrates everything I've just been talking about. Once again, we get a kind of a funky chordal intro, followed by a very neoclassical sounding and lightning fast B Phrygian dominant run. I've always felt that perhaps the greatest testament to Lindsay Buckingham's abilities is the fact that when he left Fleetwood Mac in 1987, the band replaced him with not one, but 2 guitar players, Billy Burnett and Rick Vito. That's pretty cool. I guess they figured one guy couldn't handle it. Buckingham excels on both electric and acoustic guitar, and of course is also an amazing vocalist and songwriter. I think Lindsay's even more known for his acoustic playing than his electric playing, although, as mentioned, he's great at both. Stuff like Landslide, Big Love, there's an amazing version of that he does live with a cool finger-picking part. And of course, Never Going Back Again from Rumors. He uses an interesting tuning on that one. The top 3 strings are normal, but then he goes to a G on the 5th string and all the way down to C on the 6th string. He capos on the 6th fret, although I like to go 5th. And it's a really intricate pattern, stuff like this. She broke down and let me in. in. Lindsay's right-hand technique when he plays electric guitar is like nothing I've ever seen. It's this weird kind of brush flailing thing he does with the right hand. Check out this little clip from a live performance of Go Your Own Way. Very unorthodox, but clearly it works for him. Now, another great thing about Lindsay Buckingham, besides the songs that he writes and the vocals and the guitar playing, he's also a master at bringing the best out of other people's songs, particularly Stevie Nicks' stuff. I mean, it's hard to imagine Dreams, for example, without those amazing volume swells, those little fills in between the vocal lines. And what about his contribution to Rhiannon, which was Stevie's first big hit? That ominous sounding electric guitar intro, A minor to F, always finger style with that steady, insistent bass line on the thumb.